Okay, here is my quick rant of my talk on glyphosate in Delhi on May 10. It's a 7-minute rant covering what took actually 2 hours to explain to the people. The story starts with my opinion that our planet is getting mass poisoned, India included. Next slide explains that the talk is broken into 4 segments: who am I, the science, activism, and India, followed by a single slide description of who am I. Next comes the slide on science, or rather the state of science and how it has been captured by the industry, followed by a statement that most of these industry-paid scientists are not scientists but have become corrupted peddlers of a product. But thankfully, there are still a few exceptions around. There is a question of SHIKIMATE pathway, which is being touted as the reason why herbicide glyphosate is safe for animals but not safe for plants. That argument is bunkum. Next is the history of the molecule starting from 1970s all the way to today and how it is affecting India. Next are 4 scientists that greatly helped me understand glyphosate, followed by some more scientists I have benefited from. Then comes a slide on 6 peer-reviewed papers that were published by Anthony Samsel and Stephanie Seneff, singularly focused on glyphosate. Next, how does glyphosate affect us? As a chelator, as an antibiotic, as a mimic of glycine in its bioaccumulation and ability to cross the blood-brain barrier. Then comes a slide from Monica Kruger regarding absence of cobalt in cow urines. Next, about toxicity. Glyphosate is not toxic in the conventional sense, but it destroys our biology, one cell and one protein at a time. It should not be in our food, in our environment, and on our planet. Next slide talks about the safety or absence of it with regard to glyphosate and all the bunkum, the bull that goes around, how corporations as well as government are essentially lying and hiding the truth. Then comes a slide on proteins and enzymes and how glyphosate really screws them up. Next comes a slide on ANGLO-SAXON water and how it is the most toxic on earth. The bile story and how glyphosate affects your bile so that you can't pick up some vitamins from the food. Now a chart by Nancy Swanson on the correlation between glyphosate and autism in the US. Then a few important realizations on about how the resistance movement is being controlled to stay away from glyphosate. Then comes activism, and specifically my activism with relation to the Canadian government and glyphosate. Politicians that tried to shut me up and politicians that helped me, which eventually resulted in Canada being so far the only country to have conducted wide-ranging tests on foods in glyphosate, and then in giving me the results of all those tests, which made me realize that North America makes the most poisonous foods on earth, and that analysis as a reference book has been published by me under the title of Poison Foods of North America. Then comes a statement from scientist Stephanie Seneff on glyphosate and also on my book, followed by the horrible story of how wildlife in Canada as well as North America are being pushed to the verge of extinction through birth defects as a result of exposure to glyphosate. And the next slide about the birth defects in humans and not wildlife due to glyphosate, news that are being kept suppressed and out of public eye. The next slide shows how non-GMO foods are far more toxic than the GMO foods, and there is a misconception that when it comes to glyphosate, non-GMO foods are automatically safe. Not so. Next is another slide from my book showing North American foods are usually much more toxic than the same foods produced elsewhere. And Australian food is really just as nasty as North American ones. And processed food coming out of corporations are especially bad when it comes to glyphosate contamination. Next slide tells the story of Sri Lanka getting poisoned through glyphosate and how there is a news blanket about it in India. The last section about India, is it getting poisoned? According to me, yes. Import data shows too much of toxic pulses are being imported by India from countries that grow such toxic brands. While glyphosate is high in many North American food, it is also creeping up in select foods in India. While Canada makes a lot of money selling these glyphosate-laden toxic pulses to India, and how safety limits set by Canadian as well as international organizations on glyphosate in lentils are, in my book, bunkum, because there is no proof that these high levels are actually safe. Next is a chart comparing lentils grown in Canada as against India. And now, my observation that India is beginning to sink under a rising tide of autoimmune diseases. While there is lots of talks in the media about it, I think they are still missing the bus or purposefully avoiding the possibility of link with glyphosate. Next slide, a to-do list for what Indian citizens must do, because this problem is not going to be solved by corporations, by politicians, by talking heads and these anti-GMO gurus. It needs citizen activism from the people. A short example of how I opposed the candidacy of rogue politicians in different parties and supported the candidacy of good politicians. I did it because I considered it my duty as a citizen, and so should everybody else. The last comment at the bottom is for Margaret Mead, who said, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has." My final slide says, why should we be concerned about glyphosate? Because our planet is being poisoned, and while our politicians might be responsible, the buck really stops at our feet. Thank you.